All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the next exciting episode of the Liquid Weekly podcast. I'm your host, Karl Meisterheim, and with me, as always, is the amazing Taylor Page. Taylor, hello.
Hello, Carl.
Taylor, you probably remember, but way back in 2023, Shopify launched a new customer account, unlike the classic customer accounts. They give the customer a way to check on the status of orders, subscriptions, addresses, and profile information, as you probably are very familiar with. But why did they choose to do this? And what did we gain? And more importantly, what did we lose with this switch? Well, Taylor, to answer those questions, we have with us today the mighty Patrick Millegan from Shopify. So Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Stoked to be here and really excited to get into it all today.
Excellent. We will try to keep the complaining to a minimum, but we hope to get some really good information out of this. There's a lot of people wanting you to justify why this happened, but we won't go into that too much.
Well, Brave New Frontier stuff.
Yeah, Brave New Frontier. Patrick, I know we chatted a little bit before the show, and you even brought up wanting to do this, and that's good, but as you know, I'm very much an origin story kind of guy. Maybe it was like the 2 decades of Marvel action hero movies that did that to me, where it's all about origin stories, or maybe it's just my personality. I don't know, but we'd love to hear a little bit about who you are, how you got into Shopify development. Just kind of give us some context around who is Patrick, really, and why do we love him so much?
Amazing. Let's dig in. So, with e-com and Shopify, I honestly feel like I have a little bit of like a Slumdog like millionaire career when I look back. At the time going into it, it didn't feel like that. For example, like when I was in college, I was actually fulfilling orders out of a warehouse. At the time, I was doing that because it was just a job to do. And now all of a sudden it's like hyper relevant. I'm in meetings and I'm like, oh man, I know how packing this worked. But my experience with Shopify actually starts about like 2014. I live in the Bay Area. I was living in Silicon Valley. I was a senior product manager at Disney. I was actually working on Marvel video games, believe it or not, Carl. So I had to like watch a lot of Marvel. I had to go deep on many like Marvel Insights reports. And I was really craving I'd moved to Silicon Valley. I was working in tech product and I was really craving kind of that entrepreneurial itch that probably many of us have. And what that kind of culminated in was I was talking to many phone calls with my friends. And I was like, what's an idea that we could do on the weekends? And we kind of like got fixated on this idea that like, if you've ever like sat down in your car and you sit down and like your phone or your wallet or keys like empty into that like abyss between the center console and your like car seat, is like basically we were like, that's terrible and sucks. What if we made a pair of shorts where that didn't happen? And we started doing that. And the sensible thing to do to start like a brand in 2014, I felt like, was to do a Kickstarter. And so like one of my best friends, Justice Kersey, recorded one of those videos, if you remember from that era, where people got on a camera and said, hey, Kickstarter, I've got a solution for you. And something amazing happened, which was that we sold $20,000 worth of pre-orders. And like, it was people that like weren't my mom buying that, or like weren't my friends' parents and community. It's like, this is such and such from like Indiana. And you're like, holy shit, they're buying this thing. And a natural momentum after you start Kickstarter is you say, hey, how are we going to engage this audience? And you go into Google. And I remember Googling how to start an online store. And I found Shopify. Nice. And we got really deep into that. And we set up an online store. And we wanted to make it as automated as possible. And entered this period of my life where I had this e-com brand going on the side and lots of shorts in my apartment. At one point, I had 5,000 pairs of shorts in like a 500 square foot apartment, which was pretty crazy. But in parallel, I was kind of looking for another job. And really what that kind of part of that interest in e-com went into is that I became an early employee at a company called Green Chef. If you're familiar with like HelloFresh, Blue Apron, Green Chef was like the first USDA organic certified meal kit company, but really it's an e-com subscription business, and worked with like an amazing set of talented people for about 4 years and built an e-com tech stack from completely the ground up. And we got it to around 100 million in ARR, which was like incredible, like from $0 to 100 million ARR. And we actually sold the business to HelloFresh, which is like kind of a market leader in meal kits. And this is when I became a believer in Shopify, because I found myself in meetings with all these smart people with this huge venture-backed like team, and all these people had been like chosen to come like make this their life's work. And I would like work on my side brand, and I was like, holy shit, my $29 a month subscription has like more functionality than my venture-backed homegrown e-com tech stack. And it just like blew my mind. Like it absolutely blew my mind. And that's when I was like, okay, this is clearly the future of how these things are going to get built. And after we got sold to HelloFresh, I actually went in and I went full-time on Keep for a bit, and also dove into the ecosystem and started talking to all these great app devs, kind of diligencing that for my brand. I did some like consulting with Shopify brands as well, and did that. And the big thing happened that in 2020 or 2021, Shopify went fully remote, which meant that from where I live, I could join any team at Shopify. And so I reached out and said, hey, I've been doing this kind of crazy e-com career, and I have a Shopify brand. I've got a lot of ideas, and got connected. They said, hey, have you heard about customer accounts? I was like, seems really hard to work with, and I've got a lot of ideas of how it could be better. And got to join an amazing team of people in 2021. I think actually this week is my 3-year anniversary.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, you responded to an open job, or you pitched yourself to Shopify?
Yeah. So I actually went back and looked at it to prep for this a little bit. And I just went on LinkedIn and I typed in like product management Shopify recruiter, found some people, and I just sent a note directly to people, and they were like, yeah, this does seem like relevant. And actually what was super inspiring to me was that the recruiter was like, hey, have you thought about making sweatpants with pockets? Like, have you thought about maybe we should like work together on your brand? And I was like, this is amazing. That like maybe I'll end up just working with this recruiter on this thing. And throughout the interview process, though, people were kind of asking me a little bit like, hey, do you have like just like ideas on how to improve this? And through that, I kind of talked about customer accounts a little bit, or like some of like self-serve functionality. And they said, hey, we actually have a spot for that. Introduced me to my lead, Egan Chung, who's amazing. And we kind of started getting to work on it. Yeah, so I guess I pitched myself a little bit and then got into the pipeline.
That's awesome.
That is cool. And also, Patrick, given your history there, were you at Unite 2019 in Toronto?
I was not, but I saw kind of different videos and whatnot. Were you?
That was my one and only night that I made it to. So maybe we crossed paths.
So, where Patrick was, Karl, that you were not, was Additions.
Really? You had to go there. So okay. Sorry, Taylor.
Every chance I get, I just have to take the dig, because Karl tries to bring this up with everybody. Like this, you saw what he did right there, right? Like he was trying to set you up. Like, oh, like maybe we ran into each other in 2019.
Yeah.
He tries to, because I Additions was my first like Shopify in person. So that's, take that, Karl. Bam.
No, I just thought it'd be cool if we'd cross paths, but Taylor made it a thing, so that's fine too. Patrick, that's a really cool story. So, do you still do the shorts and sweatpants brand? Is that still a thing?
I do. I actually have. This is what I ship. Your shorts with pockets are here, and these are some of my custom mailers. I actually just got a shipment in. But yeah, I mean, I ultimately like Shopify is like my main quest, and that's what I spend my time on. But I still operate the brand, and I still have people that come back and purchase with me. And this time of year, I always get a bunch of people emailing me asking about sweatpants because it gets a little bit colder. And I'm like, well, I gotta build the software to make it easier for me to have more time to build the product.
I was gonna say it's been 3 years, man. You haven't done the sweatpants yet. They talked to you about it 3 years ago. Come on, get it. We'll have some links. We'll have some links in the show notes for these shorts.
Where's the
promo code?
At the end?
Where's the promo code?
Yeah, I can do the promo code. I'll give a great discount for the listeners.
How about Unite 2019 for the promo code? That'd be a great.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that sounds great. Maybe I'll do a separate do Unite 2019 and do an Additions 2024, and maybe different discount amounts. Let people decide.
And you know which way you need to roll with the 2019 versus the 2024.
You'll have to excuse me, Patrick. I'm a little ignorant yet. So is your background primarily product development and management, or do you also have a developer background? Like, do you program as well?
Yeah, so I did like a little bit of like front end web dev, kind of starting out, and then transition into product, and I'd say predominantly like product experience as a merchant experience, and yeah,
that's really cool.
Nice. Well, I think you touched a little bit on the self-serve functionality being a thing that was something that you craved running your own store and ideas that you had there. And I think that's a superb segue from our origin story into talking about new customer accounts, because that is kind of the shiny promise of, like what customer accounts, the new customer accounts can bring, as opposed to like right now with classic customer accounts, right? We've got a lot of ability to customize different aspects of it. It's liquid templates, but you pretty much need an app to bring any real form of functionality into the game, right? And so the idea behind the new customer accounts is still technically an app, but we're talking about a lot more native functionality built into Shopify. So I don't know if you want to hit some highlights. Where's a good starting point since we're talking about the new customer accounts?
Yeah, I think that there's probably like two parts of the story, and I'll let you guys coach me on maybe which one to go first. But I think one is kind of like, what were some of our like bottoms up like insights and research that kind of I think led to building something net new is one part of this. And then what were some of the tailwinds of like other Shopify investments that moved this in this way? I think like maybe starting with insight, and I can talk through some other tailwinds. Maybe like a good.
Yeah,
good
I
part.
agree. It'd be good to talk why even new customer accounts? What's wrong with classic?
Yeah. So I think that like, I don't have visuals up here, but I think that we probably all looked at a lot of like Shopify stores. So I'll try to get us to use our imagination a bit. But like, even with like my store, Keep Athletics, I think as a merchant, oftentimes what you want to do is you want to add as much self-serve functionality for your customers as possible. So you want them to check where is my order. You want them to be able to do a return or exchange on their own. You want them to be able to manage subscriptions on their own. All these different things are really valuable for you as a merchant because ultimately it saves you time and offers better customer experience. And one of the things that I was observing, and you mentioned, like you have to kind of use different apps with classic customer accounts. With my own store and several stores in Shopify, is like, let's take like a return flow, for example. Oftentimes return flows at Shopify, you go in, you type in your order number and your email address, and then really that returns some experience and kind of gets you down the funnel. I view that as like a login moment. I think that like customers view that as like them identifying themselves to you. I think as developers, we know that that's because Shopify is this admin API that you can get. If you have those inputs, you can do a query and then build that thing, right? But when I was at Keep, with my brand, I have access to talking to customers, and I was talking to them about how can I make my site better. And a story that really stuck with me, that's always been informative, is I was, talking to this person that said, "Hey, Pat," I said, "How can I make my website better?" They said, "Patrick, the other day, this is what happened." They said, "I want to know where's my order." That's a huge question in e-commerce, right? And I went to your site and I saw this thing where I could track my package. I put in my order number and email. This ultimately brought up kind of like a order status, of like, hey, where it's at. And it said it was delivered. And so I went outside, I opened my door and I looked down and there was no package. And I assumed that maybe it was stolen or something, or a porch pirate or whatever. And then they went back to the site and they remembered that I buy shipping insurance. So with Keep, I use an app called Route, which allows you to buy shipping insurance for all your customers to help them in these moments. And when you click on the Route portal, what that person's experience is that they had to type in their order number and email again right away. And so like within 45 seconds of each other in the same customer session, they were having to identify themselves twice. And this feels like wrong. This feels like the wrong UX approach from a customer perspective. And so I think if you look across lots of other Shopify use cases or use cases that Shopify merchants try to get, there's, subscription management has a similar thing. I mean, I commonly see on stores that they have their own login to a different portal, another login to go to a return exchange, another login to do like a claims portal, and it kind of goes on and on and on there. And I think ultimately we really centered around like, two main user stories, and this is very high level, but it was like, hey, as a merchant, I want one login for my customers that I control and it's persistent across the whole experience we've created for them. So like, I don't want the double login moments. I don't have to type in my order number, email address within 45 seconds. And I think the second one is like, hey, I want a single experience that I can control where my customers can log in once and ultimately do whatever that is that they want to do themselves. And we really focused in on that. And I think that the real value from merchants' perspective was saying, hey, I want to offer as much self-serve functionality as possible. And I want to be able to then deliver as much personalized experience as possible. And one of the interesting things there, an opportunity that merchants often voiced in a lot of our initial research, was they were saying that like, hey, if someone's already doing a return, and then someone's already doing a claim or already doing subscription management, it'd be nice if when they logged in to do one of those things, that the next time they did this other interaction, they were doing that, that they were able to take advantage of that. And I think that this like actually fundamentally talks about a really awesome flywheel, which is that if today all returns and exchanges are happening outside of a logged in experience, but we could bring that in, for some apparel brands, 20% of their orders are returns. That means that 20% of their customers could now be logged in, and 20% of their customers could be getting a personalized experience. And that sounds really exciting. And that's something I'd say that like all of that together, we kind of pulled that research and said, how do we get there as fast as we possibly can? And evaluated, I think, classic login, evaluated classic customer accounts, evaluated kind of where we were going and said, hey, I think we need to build something net new here. Also, like I think a lot of best practices around like building a modern login had changed since that previous investment. There's like things like OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect that we were really interested in. And that's kind of, I think, what preempted us to say, okay, let's do that. Let's build a login that's centered around the idea that anyone can use it. Let's build a space that's centered around giving a native experience to merchants, customers. Let's try to get it all of kind of a homecoming or a unified experience of all these different apps and functionality. And what you see today, I think, is a reflection of like us trying to do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as far as, you're doing what the best you can to keep people from having to do that. Because I hate that personally. Anytime I've had to go log into something and then you have to log into something else and you have to keep putting in the same information. And like, well, this just feels weird, that you have to keep doing that over and over again. And it's very clunky, especially when it's something like an order number, because then I have to like go back to the email and copy and paste it, somewhere else or whatever kind of type thing. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense as far as like, something that they're really hoping to just streamline, right? And take that off your plate instead of people, opening up a customer support ticket because they don't want to have to keep logging in and looking at the stuff either,
Yeah.
I keep smiling when you refer to it as the new login and the classic login, because I keep thinking of like new Coke and classic Coke. That's kind of more my era, and I really like Coke. But I think what it really does, though, is it highlights, like, most of the things that happen in Shopify are gradual enough or progressive enough, evolutionary enough that they don't have to have the separate moniker, like, well, this is the new Habanero, or this is the new whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
You guys have done such a comprehensive reworking of how customer accounts even function that it necessitates this recognition as like, this is an entirely new and separate thing. So walk us through some of that, because it is so different, and it has a lot of really positive things that have come with it, but also a few trade-offs too. So can you maybe speak to that and even why we keep differentiating it?
Yeah, no, I think you're hinting at something really important. And I think that that's the ideal approach, is that, hey, we iterate kind of slowly together on things. I think in the case of customer accounts, it really was about how do we deconstruct this and get there the fastest way possible. And that's what led to some of those pieces. In terms of like, what things I think stuff we're gaining and what stuff we're losing. I think probably the biggest one there is that the approach for new customer accounts is really centered in, I think, Taylor, I don't want to make you coining the term, but extensibilified is like a term.
It wasn't mine. That was David Hollenbeck. I can't take credit for that, but yes, I'm glad you worked it in.
Shout out Dave Hollenbeck. But like taking this other approach, and I think that we really centered around, hey, with our login, we really liked the kind of open standards of OAuth 2, OpenID Connect. We really liked the idea of being able to have like a lot of customer experiences are really centered around having a lot of customer experiences that merchants are working on oftentimes can kind of like be multi-surface area. So like maybe I'll offer a use case here that'll like explain this a bit. So like we have like talked to so many different merchants. There's so many different, especially as Shopify grows, there's all these different use cases. But an example is that we talked to like a lot of sports teams. So I'm not like breaking any news here, but like let's hypothetically say that like we were talking to like the LA Lakers or like FC Barcelona or like a huge brand or something like that. Not breaking news, just giving an example that people would have a sense of. But if you look at like these like kind of businesses, what they're really doing is they have like a whole tickets and like fan experience and everything. And then they're also doing e-commerce. And when they look at Shopify as a solution, one of like the key pain points that they look at is that, hey, with classic customer accounts, my login is kind of like all about the Shopify store. when really what they're looking to have is a login that can actually span this other part of their experience, and that their tech stack is actually split across maybe like their ticket buying experience or their memberships experience or whatever their fan experience is. And they were oftenly faced with this thing of like, hey, I have to have one login for that experience and another login for this other one. Well, by building on a common standard like OpenID Connect, we're able to actually let them use our login for that tech stack, or have their own login from that tech stack and actually swap it out with Shopify to have one unified session. And that's like one thing that I think that we're gaining is just like, I think many people would probably say today, like, hey, it's not very like flexible today. But I think the architecture and the investments we're making are going to make it much more flexible around login in the future. I think another thing with just overall like new customer accounts and that experience, some of the things, observations there have been that like one of the problems with classic customer accounts, as you mentioned, of like everyone building like inside the Liquid templates, is if you're like one developer and you're managing all that, I think that's simple. But if you're a brand that's like scaling through like multiple apps, and then all of a sudden what happens is that all those experiences are kind of slightly changing the classic experience. I think the term in checkout we talked about is like upgrade safety, if you're familiar with that like terminology.
Mm-hmm.
But really what that means is that when you go to like, hey, I want to like revisit my customer account or I want to add functionality to it, all of a sudden every single person's customer accounts experience is different. And it's hard to like add that in. And now all of a sudden, I've been on some of these meetings where it's like Shopify, the brand, multiple different apps, an agency, everyone's kind of like fighting for real estate. And I don't know if those are like good conversations. I don't know if they're like really productive, to be honest with you. And I think that one approach to that is by offering a very structured space, clear extension targets, and putting the merchant in control of like, hey, I want some functionality here, I want some functionality there. And this offers a way to just deliver functionality at a really scalable way.
I think you hit on this a little bit, and I'd say that's probably, and maybe we can talk about this some, because you talked about the flexibility, but really focus, and I think that's the big part, is we're talking a lot about flexibility in the terms of functionality more so than anything. Because right now, I think a lot of people's view on this, or the argument, so with plus brands that I work with, right, like they've invested heavily in branding and all this other stuff, versus the current new customer accounts experience is not a very brand specific one, right? Like it's very uniform with any other new customer account experience, right? Because we haven't like moved to that point yet where there's a lot of ability to do that. But as far as the flexibility goes for the future, I think that's what you're saying, and that's kind of the balance. And Karl probably has experienced this a bit to some degree too, where you're working with clients, like focusing between functionality and like design, right? Because you can say, hey, like we're nailing, like functionality is the hard thing to nail here first. Like, yeah, I want to hit this 10 out of 10 before I move on to like kind of like the UI, the design kind of piece of it, because we can do that, or whatever. Like that's fine. We need to make sure that this is working really well first. But you kind of have this pushback a lot of times from not necessarily non-technical people, but people who aren't in the day-to-day from the technical aspect. They're like, well, this looks nothing like what I want it to look like. And you're like, well, the functionality is there. I just need you to sign off on this first before we can move. So is that kind of the approach that y'all are taking here? Because right now that is probably the single greatest pushback that I get when I talk to people about new customer accounts, because I'm the same. I'm focusing on, I love the functionality that this is bringing, like what we're going to gain in this space here kind of type thing. But that's usually the pushback. So I don't know if like you want to talk about that a little bit as well when we're talking about things like flexibility, as opposed to the argument now would be like, well, it's not very flexible when we're talking about like the UI, right? Or whatever.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Where to kind of talk about that is that, there is the functionality, and that's kind of like one part of this is like, hey, we're adding different apps to this experience in a structured way, et cetera. Another one that you're talking about is branding and customization. I think that like what you'll see from us is we're going to continue to invest in making this much more brandable and much more interaction there. Today, I think some of the principles that we're thinking about is from a merchant perspective, we want to make it as easy as possible for them to manage their brand across all these different surface areas. I think one of the benefits of new customer accounts being built with the kind of same customization stack as checkout through like extensions is that we use the same components, which means that if you actually brand those components, you're able to actually manage your branding consistently across that. And there's a better separation of whoever's building that functionality it already always assuming the merchant's brand right out of the get-go. And so when we first started with new customer accounts, we actually made the decision to actually have new customer accounts inherit from the checkout branding. I don't think that this is like super like clearly stated and documented, but that's how it works. We need to get better at that. We absolutely should get better at that. And I think what you'll see is that more of that will kind of unveil itself over time. And another part of that, I think, is that our login page actually isn't brandable yet. And that's something that is actually coming by the end of the year that I'm really excited about. Actually, in my 2024 roadmap, it's actually written as as a merchant, by the end of 2024, I need to have goddamn branding on my goddamn login page, because that's the voice that I think people care about. I've been to a lot of merchant events, and I used to use the phrase when I was talking about this with merchants is, merchants maniacally care about their brand, like maniacally, they really are in the weeds. And actually, one of our top merchants on Shopify corrected me and said, no, it's not maniacal. We are violently obsessed with our branding. And so I need you to really push the limits of this. And that's what I think that you'll see more from us there. Is right now, I think you can do some light branding, but really it's about like, how can you really go into each component, brand it more, and really we just need to iterate there. And so actually I encourage lots of feedback. Please flood that feedback my way, because that's actually one of the biggest help to understanding it so we can build it the best way.
Sure.
As well as drive road mapping and get more resources and all that jazz that we do at a company of our size.
Yeah, and I will say that, and I'm very appreciative of how you, not just you, but other folks at Shopify are great at this, but you are exceptional at this as well, of taking heat from people online that are complaining about stuff, of just like saying it like this is feedback. Because I will say that's a lot of merchants. I've done like just a little like screen recording walkthrough to like demonstrate it, and that login page, because it is like that stark contrast of like boom. People are like, all right, nope, like I stopped watching the video because like this isn't acceptable right from here, and you're just like, no, but like let's get to the cool stuff that it can do, kind of. So I am glad to hear that is coming sooner rather than later, kind of type. I think that'll make a big difference. Even y'all moving over to where subdomains and stuff like that instead of just on a Shopify checkout, that was a huge deal as well. So like lots and lots of progress on new customer accounts in only really a short period of time. But it is something I know that I think a lot of people probably checked out like new customer accounts early days and never even circled back around to it. So I'm glad to hear at least that there's a lot of movement already.
Well, and actually that's an interesting point that you just talked about like people looking and then, checking in on it and kind of checking back. This was something that was very important to me, especially as a merchant, is when we first started launching, is that, as you can imagine, it'd be great if we could build everything and then launch it and it's perfect.
Right.
That would be amazing. I'm all for that. Like, and we try to do that a lot of times. But I think in the case of, in our case, there, it's very important that we actually have this new versus classic distinction, because I think it allows people to opt into new customer accounts, which means that the people that are using it are the ones that are, I think, most set up for that, right? Today, new customer accounts doesn't work with apps. I don't want to force it on for anyone if they use it for apps. That would be rude, right? So I think it's important to kind of show our hand, let people know this is there, and get this feedback, and ultimately let that feedback drive our roadmaps as much as possible. And so I think that gives people flexibility while we're going through this transition period. I think I listened to one of your last episodes with Toby, and I think that he referred to like there are many parts of Shopify that are construction zone. I think that like this that's a fair characterization of this area. Now, we keep, hopefully you see it less and less look like a construction zone over time.
Right.
But that really honestly happens the more feedback that we get. And I'd say like what we've been doing with like our launch partner program, or like what we've been doing with working with partners, that's been a tremendously valuable and like rewarding experience, like getting that feedback really early and letting that drive what we're launching.
That's good. I was glad you're going to bring that. I was like, this feels like a perfect time to talk about the launch program. I don't know if Karl was sitting on anything. He's just grinning over there.
I have a lot of questions, but you guys are having such a grand time over there, to additions.
I can talk to Patrick all day. Like, he's just a fun guy to talk to, man. He's got a lot of fun stuff to say.
I have some technical questions, but I can save them for later if you guys want to keep.
Yeah, let's.
So
launch partner program. You want to talk about that? And then Karl can start digging into, because I think that'll be a perfect segue for the technical stuff. Because Karl's going to first want to know like why someone like him didn't get in when he didn't even apply necessarily, but why he wasn't invited.
I want to know how many lines
partner.
of Ruby code are involved in the new accounts.
Got it. Yeah. So where I'd start with the launch partner program is
which submissions are closed at this point, just so people do know. Submissions are closed. We've got that taken care of. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And there are other launch partner programs that are always going on at Shopify. I think there's an active one with store credit right now that I plug for my store credit friends at Shopify.
That's awesome.
Maybe I'll post that out or something. But yeah, so we talked about the idea that there's this classic versus new, and ultimately new customer accounts is a different way of customizing the stack. And we ultimately need to make, new, if the vision of, like I said at the beginning, is about how we want to have one unified experience so that customers can log into one place and ultimately that they can do all the different self-serve functionality, whether it's return to exchanges or subscription management, writing a review or sending out a referral, or, there's many, many different use cases there. But this was always really front and center of asking ourselves, hey, how are we going to do this? One of the benefits, I think, of the developer experience is that we made a decision early on to focus on extensions as the path to do that. And really like leaning into, hey, there's checkout doing this. We're going to kind of make it consistent. We don't want to have 3 different ways that people build the experience. We want to unify that as much as possible. And really as early as, I think like in 2023, after we launched and partners were kind of like, hey, how am I going to integrate with this? What we first did is we opened up kind of like, we called it a design partnership. And we went to a lot of our apps, and really it wasn't like, it was kind of like organic of whoever really reached out to us and kind of said, hey, I want to learn about this. I want to dive into this. And we said, can you just mock up like what you'd want your app to look like in in new customer accounts? Think of it like you decide where the extension targets are. You decide what the components are. And we went through that experience with probably, I don't know, about 20 to 30 different apps. And that was really valuable because that informed for us, like, where do we need to put the extension targets? What components do we need for customer accounts, et cetera? And that ultimately culminated at the end of 2023 in December, where we had the developer preview. And the developer preview was saying, hey, developers, here's kind of a preview of how you're going to do this. You can only use it in developer stores, but we want to show our hand to you as early as possible and get people to know that, hey, there's a kind of like big like platform reset happening on the surface area. And as you might expect, when we did that, we got a lot of questions and a lot of feedback. Like I think, kind of some of the stuff and energy that you've been sharing on this call kind of started coming in. And our approach was like, okay, let's lean in and really try to solve a lot of that. And from that, what you saw from our, I think, June editions release, at editions that me and Taylor hung out at, that Karl wasn't at. I was teasing. But at that release, what you saw from us was, hey, here's a lot of changes or additions to that, our developer stack so that people can really build a lot of those experiences. Also for the things that we haven't delivered yet, showing our hand and saying, hey, this hasn't delivered yet, but here's what it looks like. And here's what we're going to do in the future, as much of that as possible. And we opened up the launch partner program. And we also, it was important, we went to a public date. And so what we said was in June, we said, hey, we're doing this launch partner program because in December, we're going to launch all the apps and we want to launch with the best apps possible for our merchants. And when we did that, a lot of that was important because like when you're doing a giant surface area reset and everyone has the opportunity to kind of rebuild their stuff, I think it's important that like we allow people to start from the same starting point and like kind of the same moment in time, because I think that like if you push something out and you don't give people enough like fair warning, then what you have is like, some people take advantage of a first mover advantage that they kind of got an unfair head start at that, especially people that we were in our design partnerships with. And I think it's important to us to like really have like a balanced ecosystem where it's really competitive. I think everybody starting at the same date's really important. So, we launched the launch partner program, which basically said, hey, we're looking for the best apps, and kind of did a big call, and we got hundreds of applications. We kind of told everybody to submit about a 5-minute video walking through the merchant experience, walking through the customer experience. And as soon as people started giving us applications, we started actually meeting individually with as many teams as possible to offer like UX reviews or feasibility assessments, because people want to know, how can I make sure that after I log someone in, I take them back to the online store? There's not documentation on that. This is an important part of your app. We need to make that better. Whatever those things were, and we could really, I think, work individually with people as much as possible. But yeah, so I think like from there, it was, we got all these submissions, which we had no idea how many we were going to get. We got several hundred, and that really turned into, okay, now we're meeting with these people, but now we actually have to make selections by September 30th. And that really turned into a game where our entire team decided to just, go ahead, and we reviewed every single application one at a time. We did it just to unveil like the curtain a little bit about what the experience was like. It's kind of almost like an interview process in the sense of like, we had distinct categories that we were like looking and kind of evaluating each of the apps by. One was that just what's the merchant experience 0 through 5 kind of rating? What's the customer experience, like a 0 through 5 rating? And then the last one was like a use case fit. What I mean by use case fit is that like some use cases in customer accounts are more important than others, in my perspective.
Sure.
And another thing here is that we wanted to have the most wide and diverse set of use cases in our launch partner program, because there's so many dang merchants doing so many dang things on Shopify. And It was important to us to make sure that if someone wants to come over to new customer accounts and they want to bring maybe 5 apps, and one's an order management app, and one's a returns and exchanges app, and one's a subscription app. Well, if we only had subscription management apps, no one can switch to new customer accounts because they need the other apps. And so it was important for us to have that wide set. And I think, that came through with our selections. That's what we really cared about, because we ended up having 8 apps in our launch partner program that are actually completely brand new apps that haven't been at Shopify before. And I think that I'm excited for those developers to get some shine there.
That's awesome. And there were 40 apps that were selected, I think. Was it 40?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's awesome. Cool to hear about like the peek behind the curtain too, as far as like how those apps were selected, because I'm sure that's pretty hard too, like with especially not only getting hundreds of app submissions, but I'm sure it probably came down to like being pretty tough to make sure that they were well spread out across not only use cases but just in general, just getting that many submissions.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the main amount of submissions, but I think that actually just the quality was really high from what we saw, and that's amazing. And I think when we first started, we were only going to feature around like 20 to 30, but we bumped that number up because we just had so many awesome ones. But even still then, there was some on the bubble that I was like, damn it, like I would have loved for
Why
us
did we
to...
make it 50?
I know. Well, actually, you kind of laughed about that, but we had serious meetings about
you guys, 50 is a nice number, okay? And then it's like, but you know what? Well, something 60 is a great thing. That's you had to draw the line. You made some hard choices.
Yeah, we had to draw the line, and ultimately I think that anyone that's building early in this space is going to win, because there's many people that are going to be pouring into new customer accounts, I think, in 2025. And I think a merchant loves to hear that Shopify says this is a launch partner, and we're going to be pushing these and doing some campaigns and some fun marketing stuff for these people. But for the most part, merchants are going to, I think, evaluate based off the merits of whatever anyone built. And we're going to have a great filter in the App Store that makes it easy for people to find these. And so I think that everyone that's early, I think, is going to benefit from this. But yeah, it was a very crunchy process. Like it was a very we had to really focus. And I don't think anyone saw me tweet for crunchy. Maybe but it was a very time crunch process. But I don't think anyone saw me tweet probably for a month. It's because we were very heads down on making sure that we were having as many partner conversations as possible.
Yeah, we collectively as a community agreed to leave off on the feedback heavy in that space. We knew you were busy with this, so
Yeah,
I never agreed to that. Because no one asked for my opinion. I see we got some other questions from, especially with the SDA community, on a miss. But Patrick, I was going to ask you some technical questions, and I don't know exactly how it works there at Shopify or where you sit. So if these questions aren't ones that you can answer, totally fine. Just let me know, and I'll stop. But what part of Editions 19 do you miss, or Unite 19 do you miss most about not having been? No, I was going to ask you, what are some of the technical considerations that go into something like new customer accounts, especially when you extensibilify it? it's hard for us to appreciate on our end, like what has to happen on the back end, but it's such a dramatic shift in terms of what you guys are not able to support. If you could speak to any of some of those, maybe the big challenges you identified along the way, or some of the things that really kept you up at night in terms of how we're going to pull this off, I'd love to hear stories like that.
Oh, yes. There's many things that keep me up at night about customer accounts. Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, different times have had different moments. I think like maybe I'll start with one that comes to mind when you shared that was at the very beginning of this. Was that in 2022, Shopify was starting to make a large investment, if you're familiar with like B2B, and kind of wholesale buying. Another kind of tailwind that I think was important here is that Shopify started really looking into improving how subscriptions happen on Shopify. Another one is returns and exchanges, started really looking at that. I think another one is store credit, and a commonality between all these things that the customer has to identify themselves. And actually, I think, I don't know if this is like a technical consideration, but it's a bit more of just like telling you about like what was going on back then.
Sure.
All of those use cases were like heavily like, oh man, we have to build this, we have to build this. And then kind of all of these investments were culminating in like, okay, how do we build that into classic customer accounts in a way that like can actually like revisit the primitives or like really rethink them or work with the ecosystem? And they just didn't exist. There wasn't a way to really do that. And I think the key moment was that if you look at back to that example of how like return and exchange portals are built, they really use the admin API because the admin API is a place that has a lot of the customer data. And really what API was missing at Shopify was, hey, what's a API that can call that unique logged in customer's experience that lets you query and mutate data when we actually have that person logged in, where we actually know and have actually authenticated that person. And that became really apparent because, you know, when we're trying to build these other experiences and people start like building them with an admin API kind of app proxying in, we start exposing a lot of these problems, right? So I think an early one was like, okay, hey, there's these 5 investments that we're all making. How do we like actually funnel them all into this and kind of decide what those primitives were? And I think it's more clear now, but back then it was like, I mean, we were like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to like, you know, get all these kind of teams interested in this? How are we going to like do all the platform things? I mean, I remember like one of the biggest things that kept me up at night when I first joined the team is like one of the biggest risks of choosing extensibility was that there's this giant platform reset that's going to happen. And what if no partners build in this space? And that was like, how do you de-risk that early on? And, you know, obviously with the launch partner program now, we got several hundred. I mean, I don't know if any other launch partner program that had this much engagement, at least at my time at Shopify. And like, it's amazing that we've been able to solve that. But at the time it was like, well, you know, we need to like develop the talk track and the approach, and we need to prototype, and we need to understand how any of this stuff is going to work. And so one of the key decisions we made early on actually was, if you look at like our Shopify self-serve returns that's built into new customer accounts, that's actually the first dog fooding of a full page extension in new customer accounts. And so what we did is we actually worked with another team at Shopify to build that directly in and kind of prototype some of these things out. And yeah, back then it was like a very big grind of like figuring out like existentially like, okay, like let's eyeball this and like, how is this going to like all work out? But what made it, I think, easier and more possible to make those decisions was the engagement we got from the community telling us, do this, don't do this, you know, in these areas. And I'd love to extend that as broadly as possible to people. That was like a pretty big one, was like, how are we going to figure out apps? How are we going to actually solve all these other investments at Shopify? Gosh, yeah, there's more. When you say what keeps me up at night, there's almost too many things that come to mind. But those are two stories.
Yeah, we're here to help you, Patrick. Share your concerns with us. Really want you to get the rest.
We have
you
had
need.
several people that have recommended putting the Liquid Weekly podcast on to fall asleep at night. So that's
That's good. That's good.
Say, Karl, did you have more technical questions that you wanted to dive into as far as Karl's always going to ask about Rails. It's always he wants to know what's Ruby's involvement? What
Yeah.
can I do with Rails? Like it's
Rails, great framework or greatest framework? Really is the
That's
question. No.
Where's the starter for the Shopify
Yeah.
new customer accounts extension app that is all Rails? That's what I want.
Oh, stop it, Taylor. You're baiting me. No, first of all, I'm very open-minded when it comes to technology stacks, despite the persona I've adapted for this podcast, as we call it. But Patrick, I think one of the things that always really interests me is the monumental shift that Shopify has made over the last few years to this extension architecture. And it just always made me wonder, like, what sort of things you have to deal with as a new product space to make sure that that's going to work correctly. Trying to think of a more articulate way to phrase that, but if that's hitting something for you, by all means, just start speaking.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of hooks there. I mean, I think that there's many kind of different ways I would take that. I think one path I would say is that, like, okay, when you take the approach of saying, hey, this is going to be a sandbox space, you're basically taking all the flexibility that you could do with JavaScript and then saying, hey, how do we recreate that? Now, one of the challenges, you have to be really, really deeply thoughtful about, hey, where do these extension targets go? What are the components that we're giving that are out there? And, we can be really opinionated about, like, hey, we want to have like like a file picker component, or we need to have like a progress bar component. But you're really trying to get these components to do a lot of work for people and a lot of use cases. And you really need to be thoughtful about, like, hey, how can we make the actually just best possible base set of Legos that allow people to continue to like build and kind of create different things, but be really honest with ourselves and make sure that we're collecting that feedback and doing that. So I think that, like, that was definitely, like, when we're trying to make this new extensibility space, how do we like manage that? I think that another really big, I think like another big consideration we talked about earlier is, like, how do we make that brandable? How do we make that customizable as possible? But another one here is that, like, we're now introducing this like new editor, and this editor becomes like a really important space. And how do we make that as intuitive for merchants as possible to like add these blocks and experiences together? And so we started uncovering different problems, and maybe I'll get into one of those problems, which was like something we really focused on front and center was really like, okay, so when you're a merchant and you're trying to add an experience like subscription management, it's great that there's these unique blocks that I can play with, but subscription management is actually like a set of extensions across many different extension targets, and you need kind of all of them to work together. And it doesn't really make sense to be like, hey, just like build these generic subscription management blocks and then place them all over everywhere. And really what that takes shape in for partners is that, like, if we don't make that super intuitive for merchants to be able to like add their extensions, then really what this means is that we are creating an experience where we're launching, thousands of conversations a week where partners are trying to onboard their merchants into the new extensibility framework. And they're going on probably video calls and being like, okay, here's how you use the editor. And now I need you to add this one. And now I need you to add this one. And if you really look at that, that might be taking like, I don't know, like 4 different emails over like 3 weeks. And we saw this actually a lot with classic customer accounts as well. And in some ways, I think it would be even a bit harder because everybody has different, structures and stuff like this. But yeah, so when we, I think, started going down this like route, you just have to be like super, super duper thoughtful about how we make that easier. And that's actually what extension collections and default extension targets and default extension placements came from. Default extension placements was this feature that we basically designed so that partners can say, hey, when I build an extension, it goes into this exact specific place. And that when a merchant adds it, it's automatically going to the place that they intended. And that's really important because partners have opinions on that because they're the experts in the world on that as use cases, right? And so we need to give them tools to reflect those opinions. Extension collections is another one of these things where it's like, hey, I know that these things need to be a full page extension, an extension on the order status page, an extension on, the checkout pages all together. Well, let's make that really simple of like a very easy guide for people to just add really easily. That's very like there. And what that really materially means is that, how can we make the onboarding experience so intuitive so merchants spend more time just getting the functionality they need faster, and that partners have to spend less time doing enablement calls over and over and over explaining to people how to do the same thing. So like that to me was like an important part. And then another one, which is maybe a bit of more of a spiritual thing, and I'm curious actually what both of you guys think about this, is that like one of the benefits I think of like this structured space, and again, Taylor, you talked about it's like it is confining, but another benefit is that when customers are doing self-serve functionality, the more that they can be like previously trained on how to do this when they've gone from one store and gone to another store, that actually speeds up the experience for everybody and structures it out, right? Where it's like, hey, if I see a Shopify store and I go through checkout, I kind of know what I'm getting into. And that has like a network effect that makes conversion better for everybody. And I think with some self-serve functionality, like doing a return exchanges or editing an order or different things, that same effect can come into play where actually you get a lot of scale by developers needing to build for a consistent space. That's really good. Consumers kind of having a way of understanding what the customer account experience will be before they even, build it. But you're giving up a lot of, structure. So yeah, this is like a thing that I also think is like another like challenge that we thought about is that like, how do we make that feel consistent, but allow as much freedom of expression at the same time?
Thank you. That's really interesting. Obviously, I could keep digging, but I think at this point we're getting along. Taylor, maybe you want to bring up some of the other questions so we don't run out of time. Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as so the biggest question I hear from people is that so at this point we know. I mean, I'll ask the question just so we can go over it or whatever. But like, are classic accounts going to go away? And if so,
why do you hate them?
Is there a timeline? Like, is there like they're gone after this point kind of type thing?
Classic customer accounts does suck, and no, it did hurt me, and that it's completely emotional, and this is why I'm just joking. Classic customer accounts are going away. I don't think that we want to all live in a world where there's two of these tech stacks. Right. I think that there should be one that we're all investing in. I can tell you, like right now, all of our investment is going into making new customer accounts better in every way. We understand that there's a lot to build, and we want feedback to drive our roadmaps. So that's why we have both of these things in parallel. But like, yeah, I would say unequivocally, classic customer accounts will go away. I think that the reason you haven't seen like a public timeline from us there is really that we're just so focused on making the new thing better and getting the feedback and letting that drive things. And we want to try to create as much like organic momentum around this as possible. But I see that in our future for sure.
Yeah, maybe the better way that I can, because you kind of see this in two different perspectives as far as like what we've seen historically from Shopify from when we are moving in a new direction, right, for something. So like, let's take, for example, there's kind of two different approaches to this. And so obviously the most easy call out here is checkout extensibility. We checkout.liquid is gone, right? Okay. And so we're also getting rid of scripts and all these other things or whatever in favor of functions. So that way, long live checkout extensibility. We're extensibilifying those things, right? And so I'm so angry that you worked that in before me. But I'm glad it made it. But so we saw that happen. But like, obviously with checkout, that had to happen mainly because there's a whole lot of other stuff with like payments going on and those sorts of things where like that had to happen, right? And then we have this other like instance where we moved into a totally new paradigm shift, right? With Shopify themes, right? We've got these vintage themes that are still around today. They're still out there. People talk about that. Oh man, like everything's a 2.0 theme. No, like vintage themes are like still rocking. Like some people are rocking debut, or whatever. And so to the 2.0 architecture. So, we've had online store 2.0 for a while now. And that still lives on. It's not necessarily that it was killed off, like we didn't bury the thing, but it's nothing's being invested in there. People know that they should like move in this direction. So is the approach going to be more along the lines of what we saw with checkout extensibility of like, hey, like we're killing off this functionality kind of thing? Or is Shopify, are we going to have to see like there's still this kind of like hand in hand thing for a while? Mainly because there's a lot of people that are just holding on to their vintage, which is fun, classic customer accounts, not vintage customer accounts, but classic customer accounts.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that. We've had a lot of naming conversations, and I think what you'll see probably is classic move to like legacy customer accounts, and then new customer accounts come to customer accounts. Right. But I mean, naming does actually matter because it does. It points people in the right direction. Yeah, I think that like ultimately checkout is like how checkout went is like a great it's a model that we could go with. I think that with customer account, we can take like a little bit of like a less like urgent approach with it. That's why we've been kind of taking this path where, hey, there's 2 that are live and we're going to really let the feedback drive our roadmap and build that over time. But I think certainly we want to get to the point where we feel really comfortable that, hey, it's possible for people to create a best-in-class experience that converts really well, that lets merchants add lots of self-serve functionality, that drives lots of logins on their store. Like that's number one. We have to make that like absolutely great. I think as you see more of these kind of like features land, that's what's going to drive us setting like maybe like a more public date that says, hey, we're going to say, hey, we're going to deprecate this or sunset this by a certain time. But practically, like, we're at a point where we're close, but, extension, these apps being able to be actually used by merchants is not the case today. It will be in December this year.
Yep.
But certainly if we were to set a timeline before that, I think we'd be just launching a bunch of conversations where people are scratching their heads going like, what do you want from me, Shopify?
Right.
What do you want from me here? And so I think that like, that's like a first step, and that's a key step there. We're going to keep, really thinking about that. And that's why, like I said, feedback's so important, because we can knock out the most important things and considerations ahead of that. But that's certainly like top of mind. And there's a lot of conversations internally, like, when are you going to have a live date? When are you going to have a live date? And the answer is, we need to keep building, and we'll get to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That was. I know that was a big one.
Do you think
it is a big that's the thing that keeps me up at night, Karl. That's the thing. Is all those future conversations. But we're here for it, and I really do believe that this will be better for commerce overall.
Do you think maybe you guys could, I don't know, work a little faster?
I mean, it's funny. We try to work as fast as possible. And it's funny because we do a lot of merchant events where we pitch these different things and kind of have workshops or open tables. I was just in one in New York with some of like the top merchants on Shopify. And, if you have a conversation and there's a lot of controversy and we're talking about what's the right way to do it, that's like one thing. It's like, oh, that's good. That's engaging. But if people like agree that that's like the way to do it, then the next thing is like, well, can you hurry the F up? Because I want to move on.
Sorry.
And to which I say, tell people you want it faster. These are things that actually do materially help like driving more teams at Shopify to like work on different things. But as you might imagine at Shopify, there's so many amazing opportunities to further commerce, and we have to be like super choosy with what we spend our time on. Ultimately, another thing I'd say at Shopify, not this is kind of more for us to figure out, but like we're trying to build for like the existing millions of merchants that are on our platform, but we're also trying to think about the next like 3 million after that. And I think that there's 2 categories. There's some people that are going to be coming to Shopify from existing businesses, but there's also going to be people that are starting businesses, for the next 10 years. And I come at this truly like, I don't know if you've heard the term, but I'm a Shopify maximalist. I believe that all online stores should be a Shopify. Like, I think that that's like where we're heading. I think that's what we build. That's what I build for in mind. Like when I say that, like, and again, I'm not breaking news, but like when I think Costco should be a Shopify store, I want it to be using the apps and the new customer account launch partner program, right? Like I want us to be building so much great software that's like a thing that can be true. And oftentimes when we're building, we have to build things the right way with that scale in mind. It's like a good example of that is like our login product. Like one of the key investments that we've made in login this year with new customer login has been really focusing on scale and performance and making sure that we can handle, hundreds of thousands of logins per minute, as if every single customer merchant and every single customer on new customer accounts and every single one of them are driving to 10 more times logins than they were previously. Like that's a really important thing. And our scale, that's like a large infrastructure investment. And we've done a lot of that, which is great. And so I think what you'll see probably from us in 2025 is actually like moving on some of the more user-facing features that you might want out of a new login. I think a lot of people ask me about like, when the hell are you going to have social logins on this thing? I can tell you that's going to be at the top. I'm going to say, we need to add a merchant. I need some goddamn social logins on my goddamn log.
People,
I mean,
people
that's
want
what
the
you're going to see
social
from us.
logins, mobile number, all the things, right? And
Critical.
so that's coming. Yeah. Okay. That's
So
awesome.
Patrick,
Yeah,
you're
these
saying that you're a Shopify maximist?
Shopify
Maximalist.
Maximalist. Shopify
Maximalist?
Maxi.
It
Not
gave
like
me
not
a
like
great
Gladiator,
plot.
like
No,
Maximus Decimus Meridius, you know?
it's a great plot idea for my new Star Trek Next Generation fan fiction novel I'm working on. I'm thinking
Hell
I'm going to
yeah.
use that, and we're going to discover in my book that the Borg actually began as Patrick trying to maximize
Yes.
Shopify for everybody, and
Exactly.
it culminated in ultimately, cubes in space. So, thanks, Patrick. That's going to really work out well for me this weekend. I appreciate that.
I look forward to it. I can't wait.
Some more of that light reading.
That's right.
Yeah.
We start winding it down.
I think we do. I mean, we're having a lot of fun here. But all right, so the next portion, the third half of our show, is us getting a chance to give a little update on what we've been working on. And then, Patrick, we forgot to prep you for this, but picks of the week. So we'll share all those at once. We'll go around the room. You'll share like something you've focused on work-wise, and then something that's been exciting you lately. Could be a technology thing, could be a product, could be a pair of shorts or sweatpants.
Okay.
So yeah, Taylor, you want to go first? We'll give Patrick a moment to think about it.
Yeah, we're doing the update and that or whatever. I feel
Give a little like what you've been focused on, and then finish it up with pick of the week, because that's it. That's your last time to talk. Well, no, you get to do Changelog.
That's my last time to talk. Or so.
Other than Changelog, yeah.
Personally, my son's flag football league. We finished up for our season. Didn't win a single game, so that was pretty awesome. He's in kindergarten, and so coaching a bunch of kindergartners and stuff like that. It was a blast, and he had fun. But I'm just glad that wasn't totally destroyed for him yet or whatever. So. But so that was fun. So it's been nice to have a little bit of time. So we're getting back into the swing of things picking up with work from Black Friday, Cyber Monday season. I'm sure everybody is feeling that to some degree. So that part has been good. Wrapping up a couple of little projects. I'm very close to a big redesign that I've been working on for months. That I'm super excited about. For that to go live here in a couple of weeks. It should be live by the time this episode launches. Fingers crossed. And then, just a whole bunch of shenanigans, fighting Shopify CLI upgrades lately that, I've been complaining about a bit, opened up a couple of GitHub issues. And so, but that's all right. It's, we're light years ahead of previously what we had to do as far as tools and stuff. So it's just, going back to some of the dark days where I'm manually refreshing or having to reset my Git integration and stuff like that on themes. So I know, right? It's brutal, but I'm like, oh man, this was like just a couple of years ago. So I'm trying to take the mindset of like being grateful for what we have now.
Yeah.
So there is all of that. Gosh, like as far as what, we didn't tell Patrick either, but like I also was not even taking any bit of time to think about my pick of the week either, and so I'm a bit stumped here at the moment. It's on the outline that I created, which is really sad. But so, well, I mean, I'll think of something here, but everything I'm thinking of is like, oh man, I've already picked this kind of type thing. So, you can.
I can go. I think I got two.
Jump into Patrick can steal one of mine. Yeah.
Okay, Patrick, you get two. Taylor, you're done. You're done here. All right, Patrick, let's hear from you.
Okay, so what I'm working on this week, prepping for this podcast. That's obviously an important part of it. But we're like really deep in 2025 planning, as well as getting our release by the end of the year. So we're having a lot of conversations about like how can we sequence things like additional login methods and stuff like that. So I'm really excited about, we've been spending a lot of time on that. And then pick of the week, you kind of just said like pick of the week is very general, right? It's like a product or a thing that you're working on or just a vibe, I guess.
As long as it's something.
Okay, as long as it's something.
Yeah.
Okay, so a pick of the week is, this is maybe silly, but using ChatGPT to manage an aquarium at my house is maybe my pick of the week.
Go on.
Which is, I have never really been a pets guy ever in my life, but I started an aquarium in my house like 9-10 months ago. And I didn't know anything. And I basically just went on ChatGPT and said, like, I want an aquarium in my house. How do I do this? And I call him Fish GPT. and we talk about like how to do this. And like it got to the point where every time I like measure the water, which is like an important part of the aquarium experience, I like submit that to ChatGPT, and then it tells me what to do. And this has like grown over time. And what's crazy actually outside the store is I started out with like a small set of fish, but then 2 of them started laying eggs. And I now have like 50 angelfish at my house. It's something I never thought I would ever need to. And I'm setting up another tank. But ChatGPT is surprisingly very good personalized advice. And I don't know how I would do it without it. Like I have no idea, but it's been a fun coach. So yeah, Fish GPT. That's the pick of
Fish
the week for me.
GPT. That's awesome. Yeah. That's amazing.
So is this saltwater, I take it?
No, it's all freshwater.
Okay.
And it's like tropical fish, so it's like heated to like 80-ish degrees.
Nice.
But this is what ChatGPT tells me. We're getting there.
Interesting. That's a deep dive. I don't want to go too far off track here, but I was reading a forum the other day about someone who had survived Hurricane Milford, talking about the generator setup they had used to keep their power going for like 10 or 14 days, and how they'd use like 150 gallons of gas and blah, blah. At the end of it, when they asked like, what were you powering? It's like, oh, my aquarium.
Oh my
God.
God.
Keep my fish alive the whole time. I'm like, okay. Well, so, you're in deep now, Patrick. Get ready for it.
I know. The aquarium game gets you.
Yeah, apparently it does. It's something fishy about it. All right, so for me, I've been resurrecting a Rails app that I created a few years ago and do some updating. And I was kind of curious because I had a new feature a client asked me to add. And I was like, I really don't want to do this because it touches on the front end. And I'm not a front end guy per se. I'm like, I really need to get back in there, get on that horse and see what it's like. And so I had stumbled upon a tool recently called Cursor, which I may have mentioned before, but it's basically a fork of, not Visual Studio. Is it Visual Studio? Whatever they call it. The Microsoft IDE. And with AI built in. And it's like, well, let's give it a run, see how the contextual sort of project stuff works. And I tell you what, it was actually a lot of fun because I know enough to know what I need to do, but some of the details have been lost in the mists of time and or the vagaries of JavaScript frameworks as they evolve. And it worked out really well. So I was asking some questions. It was giving me just enough guidance. And every once in a while, it would, know exactly what to do and save me some time in terms of like auto-suggesting code as I'm typing. And the feature worked, and I felt good because I felt like it helped me get over some of the ho-hums of programming that I really didn't want to deal with anymore. And I delivered something to my client and less time than it would have taken me. And I was, it was an hourly bill. So I was like, let's save them money. And so yeah, it was fun. So that was my update and my pick. So
nice. I've heard of a bunch of people talking about Cursor, and I have yet to try it out. So gonna have to finally do that.
Kind of like 4 tools I'm using. Cursor. I got Copilot. I got Perplexity. I got ChatGPT. I'm not sure.
Do you feel like it's better than Copilot? I was just gonna ask because that's Copilot's like an annual subscription or whatever for me, so I just ate it and forgot about it or whatever, and it's handy, but I bounce back and forth between that and then Raycast has a bunch of different language models in it. I picked the Pro for that.
Raycast, yeah. No, I don't know. I can't say one's better than the other yet. It's interesting. We have an abundance of choices right now, an embarrassment of riches, really.
Yes, very much so.
As opposed to like branding your new customer account, which you have no choice on that one, but it's nice to have some choices with this. So rude.
No, you got to say it. It has to be spoken, right? That's how it gets better.
Well, that's good. As long as you don't see us as folks throwing tantrums. But I'm sorry.
I was trying to give you an out earlier, Patrick, when I was asking those technical questions. What I was trying to lead you to was, what's really hard on a technical level is branding on the new customer account page. Like, there's just so much that goes into that. It's taking us a while. So I was hoping you could use that as a defense, but you didn't even go there. So
yeah.
No, it's all good. Taylor, you got any changelog stuff for this week?
Oh gosh, do we have time? We're not.
It's always time for you. I can edit you out. Yeah.
So okay, well I'll hit a couple real fast as far as changelog stuff goes. But starting October 15th, all Shopify app stores that appear in the admin must use the latest Shopify app bridge. So that's kind of a big deal. That came out in the changelog here, so folks will see that. You'll be happy to know, working with functions, resource limits are now going to scale with cart size. I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know if you saw that one. We'll make sure to drop it in the show notes, but starting at 200 lines, your Shopify functions will be able to use more resources than ever before. That's pretty exciting. And so check that out as well. More metafield definition webhooks, which is really handy, just because we're using metafields and meta objects for everything. not in the dev changelog, but I also did see, I guess I'll throw that in there or whatever as well, but there's now a flow trigger for creating meta objects, which is really, really cool.
Oh yeah.
That's a lot of cool stuff there. That wasn't in the dev changelog. That was just the general, but that's a honorable mention. And then also obviously we do know that REST API has been marked as legacy, REST admin API, and so everyone's going to need to move over to GraphQL. All apps starting in April 2025 are going to have to be using GraphQL, and as I'm sure all new customer accounts, any apps doing that, y'all are going to need to be using that, right? So bear that in mind moving forward.
Can we change it from REST API to Classic API? I feel like it's much more respectful for what
legacy,
it was to all of us.
legacy
Instead of
vintage
legacy
API?
to it's.
No.
I thought
Awesome.
vintage, like when we talked about themes, I was like, where did vintage come from? Like, this is kind of, so I think legacy makes a lot more sense than vintage or whatever. So I like that naming convention a little bit better. So interesting.
Anyway.
But so yeah, there you go. There's a couple of items from the changelog. Boom.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Put them in the show notes too, so I can steal them for Liquid Weekly. I don't see them in the show notes.
It'll be in the show notes, Carl. I just
Awesome.
didn't drop them into the outlet, but it'll be there.
Patrick, this has been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you coming on and spending so much time, because I don't think people always appreciate the fact that we get so much support from Shopify in the developer community, and to have access to a person like yourself and just you to share your knowledge and insight. It's been amazing. So I really appreciate your time and taking time from your team to be here with us, and hopefully you felt respected and even loved, perhaps cherished, feared maybe.
Yeah. I felt the love, and I would just throw it right back at you guys. Like, I really appreciate like involving the community and getting us here and creating this opportunity. I mean, truly, we want to be where our merchants and our developers are as much as possible. That's important to me, and it's important to Shopify and our team. So yeah, feeling is mutual. Thanks so much. Really appreciate for creating the forum and space for it.
Awesome.
You betcha.
Well, we'll see you hopefully at a future one.
All right.
Look
Thanks,
forward to it.
Patrick.